Our opening words this morning are by Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker. Rebecca Parker is an ordained Methodist minister in dual fellowship with the Unitarian Universalist Association. She is the president of Star King School for the Ministry, a Unitarian Universalist seminary in California. These are her words. In the midst of a world marked by tragedy and beauty, there must be those who bear witness against unnecessary destruction, and who with faith stand and lead in freedom, with grace and power. There must be those who speak honestly and do not avoid seeing what must be seen of sorrow and outrage, or tenderness and wonder. There must be those whose grief troubles the water while their voices sing and speak refreshed worlds. There must be those whose exuberance rises with a lovely energy that articulates earth's joys. There must be those who are restless for respectful and loving companionship among human beings, whose presence invites people to be themselves without fear. There must be those who gather with congregations of remembrance and compassion, draw water from old wells, and walk the simple path of love for neighbor. And there must be communities of people who seek to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly, who call on the strength of soul force to heal, transform, and bless life. The ancient Buddhist practice of metta meditation, or cultivating loving kindness, goes back over 2,500 years. It begins with cultivating loving kindness toward yourself, then your loved ones and friends, then strangers, then difficult people or enemies even, and finally toward all sentient beings. This practice, which can take just minutes or sometimes hours, can be done as a formal sitting meditation, while walking, or even while doing daily chores. This morning, let's try out this ancient practice together as our prayer. A few years ago, this traditional Buddhist meditation was adapted and set to music by Mark Hayes and Ian Riddell. So after our spoken meditation and a time for silent reflection, we will continue with a musical meditation. The choir will sing it through first, and we will join in. Not to worry, the Spirit of Life will be back next week. Just as in my spoken meditation, the first time we sing the chant, we will use I, recognizing that we must begin with loving acceptance of ourselves. The second time, we will use you to represent family, friends, and even those people we have a hard time with. And finally, the third time, we will use we to represent all sentient beings. Let us quiet ourselves in the spirit of prayer and meditation. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole. Amen. Our reading this morning is by Reverend Karen Solvig Anderson. In August, she says, I trekked to Boston for a day of books, my annual trip to browse, review, and buy inspirational and theological texts. After 2 hours, I started off for the train. It wasn't my typical hurry that I was in, so I stopped at the Holocaust Memorial, something I had previously walked quickly past. Names of hundreds of thousands of survivors towered over me, neatly written on giant plexiglass monuments. At eye level, sayings and quotes by survivors are etched into the structures. I got stuck in front of one. For 5 minutes, my feet cemented themselves to the pavement below me. I watched the construction workers eat their sandwiches from sturdy metal lunch boxes, listening to them discuss the intricacies of Sunday's football game. A busload of kids walked around me, engrossed in the woes of 7th grade life. But the world stopped for a while as I, feet still stuck, read and reread the quote. Tears trickled out. Are there words to describe that feeling of horror that only a guttural, animalistic voice can reveal? An exhaling of breath that fights hard to return. A memorial can do that to you. A witness and testament to injustice, pain, oppression. I jotted down the quote on a piece of paper and brought it home. This tiny piece of paper received its own folder. I'd open it up, read the quote, and refile it, only to pick it up a few days later. It was magnetic. The words were by Gerda Wiseman Klein. Ilsa, a childhood friend of mine, once found a raspberry in the camp and carried it in her pocket all day to present to me that night on a leaf. Imagine a world in which your entire possession is one raspberry, and you give it to a friend. I tried to imagine. I tried to put myself in Gerda's place, in Ilsa's place. I couldn't. I would sit on the back steps of my house, eyes closed, trying to imagine the misery, the wonder of such a gift, the selflessness of the act. I couldn't get there until one day, with a raspberry pint resting in my lap, I lifted up one berry and thought of gifts given, selfless gifts by others, My mother's words of comfort the day I came home from school, humiliated that I had been the first to misspell a word in the spelling bee. My sister's half smile and strong hands clenching mine as she whispered comforting words to me past drones of machines, pumps, and tubes during my ICU internment hell. My lover's words to me that to him I am grace, I am home. With each thought, I ate a raspberry. Something previously unimaginable now took shape. My vessel of life was full, filled with gifts. I felt Gerda's words and life in a way I couldn't comprehend before, by getting to the gifts that were given to me, all residing within, like well-eaten raspberries. You're going to start thinking that I'm obsessed with TV commercials, but they are really such rich theological texts if you take some time with them. Perhaps you've seen this one. It starts with a shot of a busy street. A baby being pushed in a stroller drops her stuffed animal, and the mom doesn't notice. But a man in a suit walking near them sees, snatches it up, and places it back in the stroller. The mom is grateful. Later, the mom is in a cafe, and as she leaves with her box of pastries, she sees that a man's coffee mug is dangerously near the edge of the table. As she heads out the door, she nudges his cup over to safety. The man doesn't really notice, but there is another man who sees this through the window and smiles. The commercial continues with this same man hurrying to wherever he is going, and although he seems to be in a rush, he stops to help a gentleman who has fallen on the street. The man behind them watches this act of kindness and later sticks out his hand to hold the elevator for a woman who would have missed it. Another man in the elevator notices this and later stops a van from backing into a bicycle. It goes on and on, a cycle of small kindnesses witnessed and then passed on by strangers. Cars letting other cars into streams of traffic, a woman pushing a man on his cell phone out of harm's way, a tall guy reaching for a bowl on a top shelf for someone, a young passenger helping an older passenger get his suitcase off of the conveyor belt at the airport after he has missed it. In the end, it is a commercial for Liberty Mutual Insurance. You might recognize their tagline, the challenge, responsibility, what's your policy? It could be kindness, what's your policy? Only it's not a matter of policy, is it? And if it's not policy, what is it that causes us to be kind sometimes and aloof or even unkind at other times? What is it in us that calls us to put the needs of another above our own, or to think of others at all? And is that thing in all of us? Were we born with it? Can it be cultivated, taught, nurtured? If we help others out of a sense of shame or obligation, is that still kindness? And if there were more kindness in this world, would the world be a different place? Could the world be a different place? This is why I think commercials have such great theological content. They can start us thinking about all these things. Maybe being kind is an act of faith. Faith that if we put more goodness into the world, we can, bit by bit, create the beloved community, create a better world. So many things you can't control, so many hurts that happen every day, so many heartaches that pierce the soul, so much pain that won't ever go away. How do we make it better? How do we make it through? What can we do when there's nothing we can do? We can be kind. We can take care of each other. My colleague Richard Gilbert says our lives are like fragile eggs. They crack, he says, and the substance escapes. Handle with care, he says. Handle with exceedingly tender care, for there are human beings within. Human beings as vulnerable as we are, who feel as we feel, who hurt as we hurt. How do we make it better? How do we make it through? We can be kind. We can take care of each other. It may sound naive to encourage small acts of kindness in response to such a fragmented and hurting world. Certainly there are problems that require more. Certainly there are problems that require coalitions and political action. But I would bet that each of us can think of a time in our own lives when we were at barrel's bottom, searching for light in the darkness, and of a time when that first pinprick of light came in the form of a small gesture of kindness. Author Anne Lamott tells the story of how her small church supported her as a single mom when her son Sam was born. Anne's life at the time was, well, a bit of a mess. When she announced during worship one Sunday that she was pregnant, though, the congregation cheered. All these old people, she writes, raised in Bible-thumping homes in the Deep South, clapped. Even the women whose grown-up boys had been or were doing time in prisons rejoiced for me. And then, almost immediately, they set about providing for us. The church ladies brought clothes. They brought casseroles for her to keep in the freezer. They brought her assurance that her baby was going to be part of the family. And they began slipping her money. Now, a number of the older black women lived pretty close to the bone financially on small Social Security checks, says Anne. But routinely, they sidled up to me and stuffed bills in my pocket, 10s and 20s. It was always done so stealthily that you might have thought they were slipping me bindles of cocaine. One of Anne's most consistent donors was a very old woman named Mary Williams. Her contributions were plastic baggies full of dimes, tied closed with little wire twists. At first, Anne had a hard time accepting the money. She had internalized a sense of shame about handouts. But then, she said, she remembered that line of Blake's, that we are here to learn to endure the beams of love. And so she took a deep breath and said with a constricted throat, "Thank you." Sam was welcomed into that church family as a miracle, just like that other baby long ago. They called him our baby, and they fought over who got to hold him. Sam took a special liking to Mary Williams, who had the softness and generosity and toughness of someone who has endured great loss. And as Sam grew, Mary continued to bring bags full of dimes, even as Anne's financial situation improved, along with her sense of groundedness and stability. The old woman continued the gift of dimes. Anne began to give them to street people, and even put some of the bags on bookshelves around the house. For years after reading that story, I was really annoyed about the dimes that ended up on the shelf. I just couldn't get over my anger at Anne for not continuing to spend the dimes to help her family like Mary had intended. But now I think I understand. Finally, I understand. As if I am the one sitting on the back steps with a pint of raspberries. At first, what Anne needed was that financial support for her and her new baby, however much money those dimes added up to being. But in the end, what she needed even more than that was the kindness of the dimes. The dimes on the shelf were preserving the gesture of kindness, which was worth more than their monetary value. The real gift wasn't the raspberry. The real gift was that in a world in which her entire possession was one raspberry, Ilsa gave it to a friend. Mark was walking home from school one day when he noticed the boy ahead of him had tripped and dropped all of the books he was carrying, along with 2 sweaters, a baseball bat, a glove, and a small tape recorder. Mark knelt down and helped the boy pick up the scattered articles. Since they were going the same way, he helped to carry part of the burden. As they walked, Mark discovered the boy's name was Bill, and that he loved video games, baseball, and history, and that he was having a lot of trouble with his other subjects, and that he had just broken up with his girlfriend. They arrived at Bill's home first, and Mark was invited in for a Coke and to watch some television. The afternoon passed pleasantly with a few laughs and some shared small talk. Then Mark went home. They continued to see each other around school, had lunch together once or twice, then both graduated from junior high. They ended up in the same high school where they had brief contact over the years. Finally, the long-awaited senior year came, and 3 weeks before graduation, Bill asked Mark if they could talk. Bill reminded him of the day years ago when they had first met. "Did you ever wonder why I was carrying so many things home that day?" asked Bill. "You see, I cleaned out my locker because I didn't want to leave a mess for anyone. I had stored away some of my mother's sleeping pills, and I was going home to take them all. But after we spent some time together, talking and laughing, I realized that if I had killed myself, I would have missed that time and so many others that might follow. So you see, Mark," he said, "when you picked up those books that day, you did a lot more. You saved my life." Can one small act of kindness change the world? It changed Gerda Klein's world. It changed Anne Lamott's world. it changed Bill's world. Whether it's from the meditation cushion or on the sidewalks of the street, it starts by being kind to ourselves. It grows with our tender care for our families and friends. It extends with thoughts and acts of kindness toward strangers. And it ripples out kindness by kindness, slowly bringing light to all the darkness. How much can the world be changed by small acts of kindness? There's only one way to find out. Let's find out. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May